name is Becky Webster, and I'm a senior staff attorney here in Oneida. And my primary focus here in Oneida is on environmental issues, land use issues through land management, development of our land, also a variety of housing issues, and intergovernmental cooperation with local governments. I've been here for about 10 years serving these different departments in my capacity as an attorney. And I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'll just start off with a little bit of background about Oneida. So as our other presenters discussed the Menominee ceding their territory, some of their territory, we were some of the beneficiaries of those ceded lands. In 1832, when we entered into our treaty with the United States, there were 654 Oneidas. So that established our current reservation at 100 acres per person. They used the formula to decide just how big of a reservation we needed. So we have 65,400 acres on our reservation. And also, you've heard the devastating effects of the General Allotment Act. Our reservation was allotted, and after Congress passed the Indian Reorganization Act in '34, we adopted an IRA constitution, and soon thereafter began to reacquire our land. The devastating impacts from allotment on the Oneida Reservation left us from a 65,400 acre ownership to less than 1,000 acres. But since the IRA, we've been able to reacquire a significant portion of our land base, and we're now hovering right around 40%. And our goal is to continue to reacquire land as it becomes available. So when we adopted our IRA constitution, we adopted it with a general tribal council, and that is how our governing structure is set up. Now, the GTC has delegated some of their authority, pretty much most of their authority, to our 9-member body of the business committee. There are 4 officers and 5 non-officers. Those 5 non-officers are considered our legislative branch. So that branch of government is the branch that creates the laws for our tribe. And then it goes to the larger business committee, all 9 members who vote on our laws. So one of the laws that the business committee adopted in 1996 was the real property law, and that's in your materials. This law generally talks about how land use is going to be handled on the reservation as a general sense, and it delegates the authority to make those decisions to the Oneida Land Commission, who is also an elected body. So anyone who's familiar with politics would know that such a delegation of such a huge decision-making process would lead to some tensions, and there are some tensions here, especially when somebody from the outside, like the DOT, comes in and wants to get permission to use tribal property. So who do you come to? A lot of people think that you come to the business committee because they're the top form of elected government here in Oneida, but that's not the case. You have to go to the Oneida Land Commission. They're the ones that have been charged by the business committee to handle all land use decisions. We have a series of laws that also deal with how we decide how to use our property. We of course have a pretty comprehensive zoning ordinance, but that's just freezes time and tells you what you can and can't do on a particular piece of property. In order to guide our decision-making processes, we've established some time ago a group called LUTU. It's Land Use Technical Unit, and I did send in some materials, so they'll be available afterward on how all of this works together. LUTU is, like the title says, it's a technical unit. If somebody wants to use tribal property, they come and they ask the Land Commission, hey, I want to figure out where a good spot would be for a house. And then what the Land Commission does is they send out the charge to this technical unit, which is composed of folks from Environmental Department, our Cultural Heritage Department, and our Development Division, of different folks that will come back and generate a report that shows where the buffers are, where there are environmentally sensitive areas, where there may be culturally sensitive areas. Just all of the different factors that you would need to know about a particular piece of property to decide, is putting a house here a good idea? Now that's the first part of LUTU. After we have established all of the different buffers and what's on that property, then we can look at that and say, okay, we want to put a house on this piece of property. Then they do further analysis of that, and that's all described in our LUTU process. We also have a building code, and we have adopted another code called the local land use regulation reimbursement policy. I know that's a mouthful, and I'm going to point at Jeff back there because he would not help me come up with a better title for this law. So it's affectionately referred to as LURP. So LURP is a law that we have passed in order to protect our tribal members here in Oneida, because unlike Menominee and like a lot of other reservations, we have the classic checkerboard ownership patterns here. Remember, I was saying we hold title to about 40% of our land, but that means that 60% of the land is owned by non-members. So we have a lot of land here that we don't necessarily try to regulate because there is one local government that's entirely located within the boundaries of our reservation that has some pretty crazy ideas about us. They think we don't have a reservation anymore. They don't think that we should be able to regulate our members. They don't think we should be able to have land taken into trust. And they're also taxing our trust land. So it leaves us in a really difficult situation, especially if you are a tribal member and either you're on tribal fee land or you own your own fee land and you're within the boundaries of this one part of the reservation. Well, if you're a tribal member and you're on the reservation, it's pretty clear you're subject to tribal law. But this one local government doesn't think so. So they will come and try to enforce their laws against our members who are on fee land. And what this LURP does is it's our best way to try to preserve our sovereignty, preserve our ability to regulate our members on the reservation while decreasing the burden that's on those individual members. So this law says that if you are a tribal member on the reservation, you come to the tribe first to get your building permit and your zoning permits. And then if this local government comes and harasses you, you can get a permit from them under protest and then come back and we will reimburse you. If they give you fines, come back to us and we will reimburse you to try to alleviate some of the concerns. And I'll admit, this is not a perfect law and there's a lot of folks that are really unhappy with it, but at this point we're really struggling with how do we try to preserve our sovereignty here within our boundaries when we're coming under attack from a local government who says we shouldn't even exist. So that's one of the things that we think about. So the DOT could be in a similar situation when they're coming onto tribal property and wanting to perhaps put a road through tribal fee land. We would follow our normal processes the same we would as if it was trust land, meaning we would check out the environmental situation there. We would check out, make sure there aren't any cultural heritage issues we need to be aware of. Check out, make sure nobody has a lease on that property already, and make sure we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's. But there may come a point when this village comes in and says, hey, you need to get a building permit from us. So that's just something that we try to make people aware of too when they're coming onto our reservation and coming onto tribal property to try to do some type of construction activity. That something like this could very well happen. So when we are drafting new laws, we would try to make them broad enough to say that they're going to apply to anybody who's subject to the tribe's jurisdiction. And for those of us that are familiar with Montana, that's the Supreme Court case which recognized that tribes have limited jurisdiction over non-members unless one of two things happens. One is the non-member consents, and the other is if their activity threatens or has some significant effect on the health, welfare, safety of the tribe or tribal members. So in the environmental arena, we would all think that it's pretty clear that we should be able to regulate everything that happens within our reservation boundaries in the environmental scheme, because no matter what people do with respect to environmental activities, it's going to affect our tribe and our tribal members. But the courts are not quite as lenient toward that possibility, and they have really only upheld that Montana exception one time, and it was a zoning case. So they haven't ever upheld a tribe's ability to regulate non-members for environmental reasons in such a situation as Oneida. So as a result, unless we get TAS, and we had attempted to some time back and it didn't quite work out the way we wanted to, but like Menominee, we're going to go for it again. We're trying to get our ducks in a row to see if we can try to pursue that again in the future. But until we do, we're very hesitant as to who we can and who we can't regulate. And especially when it comes to our own members on our reservation, we're really concerned about putting those members in between the dispute between the tribe and this local government. So I really don't know if we're going to save questions till the end. And I know it's a very short presentation. I was anticipating more discussion. You guys look really wrapped and really excited about all this stuff that's happening. But I am anxious to have a discussion. Anybody has questions at the end, I'm more than ready to talk about it. Thanks.